Hi guys, my name's Seb Tudor, I'm the man on the Silver Mountain, and welcome back. Now today, I wanted to talk about the Last Jedi, oddly enough, because again, I feel like this is another case of creativity by committee, and it's been a while since I've done one of these videos, and so I wanted to come and jump in on this, whilst admittedly a little late because I saw it over Christmas. A little late after it had come out anyway, because I was quite busy beforehand prepping to go off and see Hannah for Christmas and stuff like that. And so, I wanted to jump in on this now because, again, I feel like creativity by committee. I did the videos a while ago on things like Batman versus Superman and Mass Effect Andromeda rather, and stuff like that. And so, I wanted to jump in on this one as well, considering especially there's been so much kind of vitriol and hate around this in various ways. So first off, I didn't mind the movie. I would say that like things like Star Trek, the most recent Star Trek Discovery, there is such thing as a good film that follows or good film or good TV show that follows the legacy of the prophecy of the source material. But then there is also just good for the genre. So with Star Wars as a kind of fantasy science fiction, I would say that it was a fairly good sci-fi movie, but it was a pretty poor Star Wars movie. And the thing that stands out to me is that the critics, again, showing that they don't really know what they're talking about because they're disconnected from the audience. They're thinking in terms of film and in terms of analysis that just aren't realistic for either a consumer or for anyone else. Any bloody other person that's looking at a film isn't going to look at it the same way a critic does, because they are so removed and attempting to be so academic in a way that doesn't make any sense to the actual either profitability of a film or the way that it is received by the people who it is going to be kind of either praised or condemned by. So the critics' opinions are usually nonsense, and I've seen this from film students as well that I know from various other places who absolutely loved it because it was pretty and because it was this and it was that, but they're not paying attention to the way that it was structured or the way that it was otherwise worked, and it definitely didn't line up with the way that the fans paid attention to it. Whilst my opinion of it being a mediocre Star Wars movie but an okay sci-fi is reflected by, for example, the Rotten Tomatoes score. Which I think was the Rotten Tomatoes score was 54% the last time I looked, which granted was a week or so ago, so it could very well have gone and changed by now. But it's a mediocre. Like, I would say that it was probably about a 7 out of 10 for a sci-fi film, because it was pretty and the story wasn't great and there were too many Deus Ex Machina moments and all that kind of thing. But it wasn't like just horrible out and out. But as a Star Wars film, I'd probably say 4 or 5. It didn't really pay much attention to the legacy of the film or the themes of any of the other films in regards to the themes of things like self-sacrifice and all the rest of it. I've heard people trying to praise the Star Wars films, though, for being these amazing masterpieces, and they fucking weren't. I love Star Wars. It's a great universe, but the films that Lucas put together to begin with, episodes 4, 5, and 6, they were all very simple, like hero's journey stories, and they were basically a sci-fi western with lightsabers and blaster pistols. There wasn't really much else to them in terms of their structure and their storytelling and their other bits and pieces. They were really great to see on the screen, especially for the time where the kind of capabilities of film weren't big CG kind of set pieces. They had to be all made by hand with models and very specific kind of shooting kind of methods and things like that. Not going to fault it for that at all. But it wasn't as a film, as a universe, amazing. As a film, nothing like far out from other films of the time. It was the universe and the way that it grabbed people that made them special. Jump to the prequels, episodes 1, 2, and 3. They still had the themes of self-sacrifice. They still had the themes of kind of the distance between good versus evil, and then how the people at the bottom rung didn't really interact with that. It was a thing that just didn't sit with them in any meaningful way, because it didn't affect their lives. It didn't impact them. You had the whole of the Senate looking at the Jedi in those first films, going, "What? You're talking about all these things. You're trying to do all of these things, and now this is what? This is some war that we didn't even really necessarily want, and it's all gone a bit skew-if." And there are so many odd bits and pieces. But again, a lot of that from those films was a fairly straightforward kind of hero's journey thing. It was just that the hero fell. Yeah. And so, it was fairly straightforward storytelling. It was fairly simple. And we just saw this kind of roll. Now, get to The Force Awakens, and we saw, again, fairly simple storytelling, very, very much of a mirroring of A New Hope, and that was kind of good, because it was good setup. It allowed for that cycle, which we've seen before anyway, and it allowed for this interesting setup of familiar kind of old stuff with old themes of things like self-sacrifice, where Finn jumps in front of Kylo Ren with a lightsaber towards the end of the film, and so on and so forth. And there were issues. There were the substantial overpowering of the main character, Rey, for instance, and in regards to certain other areas of the film where there were Deus Ex Machina moments where they could have probably been better handled. But it's fine. We'll let that go, because this is a universe where the Force exists, and so I didn't have an issue with the casting or anything like that. I didn't have an issue with the characters. I was actually really hopeful after seeing The Force Awakens. Now, though, we jump to this most recent film, The Last Jedi, and we are seeing a collapse. So we're not seeing and there may very well be some spoilers here, by the way, guys, for anyone who still hasn't seen it yet. But as I'm assuming that most of you have, I'm just going to keep running. But ultimately, if with this movie picks up straight after the end of the last one, I felt that was a big mistake, because it didn't, if you look at the first trilogy and then the second trilogy in our continuity, not the Star Wars actual continuity, they leave time between each movie for progress, for development, for things to have happened, to then set up new conflicts and new situations. This film didn't do that, and I feel like that was a storytelling mistake. We had characters that some people absolutely adored, like Rose Tico, who, quite frankly, I thought was a terrible character. You could have replaced her with a droid, and it would have done exactly, the same role would have been fulfilled. The progression of the characters was a bit dodgy, and the biggest issues that I had were that you had characters like Leia and Luke still around, and the way that they interacted with other characters, the way that other characters interacted as a result of them, and then the various ways that they behaved in and of themselves didn't seem to line up with this huge legacy of what we know of the characters. And then on top of that, also didn't function with the legacy of the franchise as a whole. Realizing that this has been a huge this universe has had a huge retcon from a legacy that people knew for decades. Yeah, you had stuff happening from the books, from various other areas, from games, from other things that expanded and expanded and expanded on this universe, and they were completely removed by Disney. because they weren't in film or they weren't in TV, and so they just retconned it as the Legends stuff. Now, some of that stuff has been confirmed as truth, either through the TV shows or through the movies. Fine, that's good, that's great. That means that there are things for the legacy to continue through and things for the fans of the old material to hold on to as well, to continue to be invested, because they are, of course, the people that provided the money and provided the support to continue to build this franchise out. The only reason that it was worth Disney buying was because of those fans that had continued to throw money at it year after year after year for several decades. And so now with this movie where we're seeing older characters, especially Luke with his death and the way that he has followed through with various things, or not, as the case may be, and the situation between him and Kylo, where it was set up as something really, really odd, that I didn't seem to make sense to me from the first movie anyway. In regards to the stuff around Kylo Ren and the new Jedi Academy and that he had set up and all that kind of thing, it didn't seem to make sense. And then the interactions between some of the characters where they had shifted from being characters that were easy to invest in and that we could work with, to some of them just making really odd decisions and jumping at things from weird angles and having to get bailed out on stuff when we knew that they were particularly capable before. Now, I'm not going to go into some huge long breakdown of this in particular for the moment, just because there's so much to get through in regards to the poor storytelling and all that kind of thing, that and the way that the legacy has been treated, that it kind of, I think I would have to do like 2 or 3 videos on it just to break it all down properly, the same way that I want to do with other things. But what I will say is that yes, it was a very pretty movie. Yes, it was very well shot. But in terms of a general story, it was kind of flimsy, with too many, this just happened to save these characters, or this is just going to be here to create completely artificial drama for no reason, like Admiral Holdo and Poe Dameron being at odds with one another. Made no fucking sense. It seemed to be very much a case of her being there to purely be a martyr and to purely put down one of the main characters so that he gained growth. But surely he could have gained more growth by having a better mentor who understood his mindset more fully. If she's dealt with people like him before, as she said at the beginning of the kind of movie towards the early section, then why wasn't she better capable of dealing with him accurately, informing him of the plan and doing other things around kind of everything to do with that military mindset and that forward motion of their rebel fleet? Why wasn't she a more effective leader? Because leading has to do with communication, it has to do with self-sacrifice, sure, but she didn't display either of those things until she basically killed herself. Suicide is apparently preferable to better communication and effective leadership. Self-sacrifice should be taking the weights of everyone's concerns on your shoulders, not literally blasting yourself across the hull of another spacecraft. But anyway, there were all manner of different things like that were flimsy and broken in regards to the storytelling. So here's the thing, though. We've got now this movie that's sat in this legacy. It's got these issues with the characters and with some of the other things that have been thrown in there for seemingly absolutely no reason, and some of the responses around this stuff in regards to Daisy Ridley's comments about saying, anyone that calls Rey a Mary Sue is sexist. No, she's legitimately a Mary Sue. She makes poor decisions at times, and yet is still seen to be justified. She has a large level of power in an area that she is in no way familiar with for reasons. You know, even you know, there are elements around those two things anyway that demonstrate that she's being written in as something beyond what she actually is. And that's troubling to a lot of people, because even Luke, who is now this huge hero throughout the entire thing, even Anakin, who was a huge hero throughout his entire arc, they were both in need of substantial training. Even Kylo Ren was in need of substantial training to do even half of what Rey has done. Years of training in some instances. And yet she is able to pick up and do straight away. When Luke made poor decisions, he ended up losing a hand. He ended up getting his friends into trouble and having to try and bail them out. He ended up upsetting his tutors, and so on and so forth. There were consequences to his fuck ups. Rey hasn't had that, at all. So it's no, she's being given a really easy ride as a character for no reason, other than she's there. And there were just so many things in this movie that seem to flag stuff up as well. And it's the same kind of thing that I saw in Rogue One as well, where there was one interview where the cast were being asked and they said, oh, well, you've never had a diverse cast like this before. It's like, really? Take a look at any of the other movies. You've had a collection of races, a collection of alien species, a collection of men and women in all of the movies. And yet you're saying that this movie, in Rogue One, and now these other new movies, they're the ones that stand out as having those... No, this has been the case of this all along. Why? Because the good versus evil doesn't care what colour skin you are, what species, what race, what anything you are. The good versus evil within this universe is so omnipresent and just miasmic that it doesn't matter who you are, it's going to affect you. That was one of the main kind of coursing themes throughout all these other movies as well, that has been forgotten and dropped and kind of ignored in The Last Jedi when it was in the one before. It seems to be a very odd kind of shift. And yeah, it is troubling to me, because obviously if you ruin the legacy of something now, then another 10 years, 20 years go by, this franchise could have died, because people who were supporting it for so long, introducing it to their kids, and then their kids were introducing it to their kids because of those experiences early on, that could all die out just because people aren't engaged with it anymore, because of how things have changed and what things have been forgotten. And so having this split between, oh, we're going to open it up to more storytelling. Great, not got a problem with that. But also we're going to compress it so that it has to be an analogy for the real world. No, let's not do that. Oh, we're going to do these things to these characters with these established histories because we can. Why? We're going to make stuff up purely to justify what we've done with these characters. Okay, but then what about when that contradicts stuff from before? The some of the things that people are complaining about, some of the things that people are roaring about in regards to tracking through hyperspace and all that kind of thing, that's fine. That I don't give two damns about. It's entirely possible that technology exists in this universe for that to happen. Fine, not fussed. The thing that stands out to me is that these movies have always been character movies. You didn't give two damns about Gold Leader when he gets blown up, for instance, in the old films. You cared about Luke, you cared about Han Solo, Princess Leia, Chewbacca, the droids. You cared about all those things. You didn't give two damns about the huge shifts in technology, in politics, in that kind of thing. And that's where the prequels took an awful lot of heat, because the prequels were too political. They were too slow. They were too much of a whiny teen love story in places. And it was all stuff that detracted from what we wanted to see those characters doing, which was engaging with each other, engaging with the problems that they were facing and moving forward with them. Being the hero in the hero's journey and coming out the other side of it. That's what we wanted to see. That's what those movies were. And so with this, as I said, it's troubling to me, because I don't want this franchise that I've loved throughout my childhood, that my dad introduced to me, and that I've introduced to others in various ways, and sat down and gone, we're going to watch Star Wars because you've never seen it before, and then they've loved it and they've gone, oh well, this was actually really cool. Great, so now let's do some more with it. Let's play a video game. Let's play a tabletop role-playing game. Let's go out and see the next one in the cinema. It's become as much a kind of big cultural phenomenon that brings people together, and yet now, between the way that it's being treated on the screen and the way that it's being treated around the franchise by the people engaged in it, I feel like you've got this board of directors at Disney that are engaging with the directors of the films and the stars and the PR people and all the marketing lot, and they are going for kind of the run with the public to go, oh, look at how diverse we're being, because that's of course a thing that everyone wants to see, as far as they're concerned, because it's what you hear screamed about a lot. And that even though it doesn't apply to this franchise at all, and then you've got this kind of upsweep of, well, we want to try and get more people in on this so that we can gain as much additional following as possible to gain more money from it. And that creativity by committee, that boardroom mentality where they're just approving things or letting things run, like it bugs me, because Rian Johnson saying, oh, I want to make my own trilogy. Fine, go and make your own trilogy. There have been people that have pitched ideas for the Seven Samurai set as a Jedi film, Jedi crashing on a planet and being stuck there in that same situation. We've had talk of films for characters that we would love to see who have huge holes in their backstory. The Obi-Wan story, Han Solo's solo film, all of these other characters. How about stuff from the old material being reworked and revamped and reused so that we see more of, I don't know, something far beyond it, like a new Jedi Academy, like all of this other stuff. What about the Law of Two as devised by Darth Bane, which I believe was confirmed in one of the TV shows as well? And this is me going a bit nerdy on you guys here, but what about that, where it seems to be coming true and being accurate in the movie, but then at the end of the movie you've got the weird little Force kid with the fucking like rebel decoder ring, of all the stupidest fucking things. It's there's so much in there that's just juvenile and stupid, from The Last Jedi. Also seems like missed opportunities. Luke just fading into nothingness for seemingly no reason. Leia, not dying when she had the chance to, when they fully knew that unfortunately Carrie Fisher couldn't return to the role. It's a case of you're now handing it again onto a different director, because I believe it's J.J. Abrams coming back for episode 9, and you've left them with an audience that are regarding your franchise negatively, and a group of characters that have been broken and shifted in ways that they didn't have to be. There's so much that could have been done with this, and in a much better way that was also more respectful of where this all came from. And I don't expect critics to understand that, and I don't necessarily even expect people that aren't fans of Star Wars or fans of sci-fi to understand that. But there's a reason why Star Trek has been so successful over the years. There's a reason why Star Wars has been so successful over the years, even though Star Wars itself had a whole load of books. But if you think about it, the main place that people loved the franchise from wasn't the books, it wasn't even the games necessarily, it was those movies, and there were 6 of them over like 4 or 5 decades. I think we've just had the 50th anniversary of Star Wars, or like not too long ago, and it's like, so over 50 years there were all of like 6 movies, maybe 7 if you count that odd like Star Wars holiday special thing. But you've had 6 movies and it's fed at least 2 or 3 generations of fans of this franchise. That's a really like, for the same amount of kind of fervid engagement, Star Trek, several different shows all working together, a collection of like 12 to 13 movies, not including the new rebooted ones or Star Trek Discovery, because Star Trek Discovery is an okay sci-fi but a crap Star Trek, and the new movies are okay sci-fi, action sci-fi, but not great Star Trek for the most part. Again, due to lack of focus on themes and due to things either not adding up or things just being done seemingly for the sake of diversity in their sci-fi, as opposed to focusing on what was important from the legacy of the show. So it's all. Lots of people have gone, oh well, let's blame social justice, and I'm like, well, no, let's not, because in this case, whilst there is a big element of social justice and the silly kind of regressive left thinking being put into this stuff, those opinions were around to one extent or another in previous times. These shows and these movies, especially in regards to Star Wars, never regarded those kind of things anyway. And so, for the most part, there's this, I don't think we need to do that, because again, Disney wouldn't have gone. Disney are the people that have given the final word on what can be and can't be in this stuff. And so I would say we need to take more of a look at who's greenlighting this stuff and who's working around it, and how they seem to think that the old legacy doesn't matter anymore, when it's the only reason that what they bought was worth them buying in the first place. But anyway, guys, I'd love to hear your thoughts. As I said, I've kind of trying to brush over some stuff and only touching on a few spoilers, because I know that there are still some people that haven't seen the film. But, I've seen so many huge arguments kick up around this in so many different ways, and it's like, it wasn't a great movie. For what it wanted to be, for what people wanted it to be, for what the fans were engaged for, it wasn't great. It was very mediocre, to say the least. To those people that go, oh well, it should be retconned, what I would say is, we've already had enough retcons. They've already ruined enough doing that. So whilst yes, they have just they retconned a whole load of stuff, so why not just retcon this as well? It doesn't matter. What I would say is they've started to kind of make their bed, so now they can lie in it. Yeah. George Lucas took and the prequels took a huge amount of flack for how mediocre some elements of those movies were. So what I would say is, and yet now we can still line them up in the timeline and they can be there. Fine. I wouldn't remove The Last Jedi, but what I would do is go, Episode 9 needs to be better by a long shot, and then the cutoff of the end of Episode 9 needs to be the beginning of Star Wars again, as more of what Disney seems to want it to be, and that is a more open universe. And the way that I see that they could do that would be to have a good long hard look at the Jedi Knight games, especially the Jedi Knight Jedi Academy game, because the storyline in that and the involvement of other Jedi being trained under Luke and Kal Katarn and whoever else, that as an idea would be a way to move forward. I would suggest that we've got Poe Dameron, who is this amazing pilot, and his parents interacted with Luke in their youth, and he was born in a place where there was one of those Jedi Force trees that Luke gave his parents. That's information from the comics, by the way, if you're interested. He could quite happily be a Jedi. Finn woke up from mind control and took on Kylo Ren, and even though he didn't win, he took him on for a reasonable amount of time there. there's another proto-Jedi, and then we've got Rey. You've got three schools of Jedi. You've got the what is it? The Consulars, the Knights, and the Sentinels, I believe. And so, you know, you've got these three individuals coming out of these movies. Make them older, recast them, make them all Jedi, to one extent or another. You know, make the Jedi Order less rigid, more open, and stop trying to grey everything. This is something that I've noticed a lot in various things, where you've got two distinct sides, good and evil or whatever else, and one of the things that when you come into a social justice space, you try to strip away all of the defining features of each character, of each sect, of each race or species or whatever, purely so that they all become this matte grey and equality happens. Stop doing that. Because the way that the Star Wars universe works is that there is the same way that we have forces of nature and everything in the real world that can be measured and dealt with. The Force is a legitimate, actual physical law there, you know, and it is this ever-present thing. You can't strip that away without removing Star Wars from that universe. Unfortunate for people that want to tell certain stories, but then also look at other characters. Again, another computer game was Star Wars Bounty Hunter, where you played as Jango Fett. Yeah, no Force involved in that at all, from what I recall. Just a Mandalorian bounty hunter trying to make his way in the world and earn some credits. Guess what? You can tell any story with this backdrop, but there's still this legacy that needs to be adhered to and worked with. The TV shows, from what I've seen, I need to catch up with Rebels season 3 onwards. But from what I've seen, the TV shows have been really good. And in fact, in places, they've been better than the movies because they've dealt with a lot of the ins and outs and different facets of society that characters have moved through. But now looking at the new movies, The Force Awakens, yes, was it a bit overly nostalgic and stuff like that? Maybe. But for the most part, I thought it was fine. Rogue One, bit weak, but that was partly also because we already knew how that story ended. Last Jedi, this is where we've run into a bit of a roadblock because they are eroding what has kept this franchise going for the last 50 years or so. And it's going to be very hard for them to rebuild that and restructure it in a way that generates trust again in the way that the franchise is being handled. So we'll have to see. But anyway, as said, I've started rambling. So please leave me your comments on this and what your thoughts were about the movie and about the way that the movie has been handled, especially down in the comments. And otherwise, thank you very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the video tomorrow. Take care. Thank you very much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video or found it interesting, then please drop us a like, share this video, and subscribe for more. And I'll see you in the video tomorrow. Take care.